At the very beginning, I said one thing. If you try to fill the emotion now with no preparation and no background and no breeding.
Robert Culp saved Bill Cosby's career in 1965. The network wanted Cosby gone after the pilot. Culp rewrote scripts. He coached him between takes. He threatened to quit if they fired him. 3 years later, Cosby won 3 Emmys. Culp won nothing. Their wives stopped coming to dinner because the two men spoke in a private language nobody else understood. But behind those jokes, something darker was growing. Culp later said Cosby carried a deep anger and acted like the world owed him success. What really happened between them on the set of I Spy? The truth took decades to come out. Robert Culp came into the world on August 16, 1930 in Oakland, when the Great Depression still sat heavy on people's shoulders. He was an only child, and that detail shaped everything. His father, Crozier Cordell Culp, was an attorney who believed in safe plans and steady careers. His mother, Bethel Martin Culp, worked in a chemical plant in Berkeley, handling harsh substances day after day. And the job wore her down more than she ever admitted. At home, the quiet was loud. With no brothers or sisters to fill the rooms, Robert found his own way to make the house feel alive. He went into the damp basement and turned it into a private stage. Then he built marionettes with his hands and made them fight and dance on strings he pulled for hours. He gave them voices too, heroes and villains, laughs and threats, anything to push back against the silence. Now and then, a neighbor would peek through a window and see a skinny kid lit by a lamp, commanding a whole puppet world like he had an army down there. It looked strange, but it also looked fearless, like something inside him had already decided it would not stay small. His father kept pointing him toward law, but Robert kept slipping away from it. He drew instead. Not cute doodles, but sharp cartoons that mocked crooks and politicians, and he made them so biting that Bay Area papers bought them when he was only 14. That money mattered, because the family did not have money to waste, and his mother's health issues only tightened the pressure. Oakland was changing after the war. Factories were busy, yet a lot of families still scraped by. Robert could feel how fast life could fall apart, so he started moving like someone who had to win before the door closed. That same urgency showed up on the field at Berkeley High. He became a pole vaulter, and he did it with the same wild focus he used in the basement. In 1947, he cleared 12 feet 3 inches and took second at the CIF California State Meet. It was the kind of moment that turns a teen into a name people remember, and it brought him scholarships and praise. Yet even while coaches celebrated him, he kept chasing his other life. He kept drawing cartoons for cash, and he kept collecting little pieces of a future that did not look like his father's office. The two worlds started to feed each other. The vaulting built his body and his nerve, and the cartoons built his eye for people, their lies, their pride, their ugly corners. He could sweat through practice, then go home and ink a crooked cop or a greedy boss with a grin that told the truth. Sometimes it was so raw that editors warned him it might be too harsh, and then they printed it anyway. His father hated those drawings. Robert would leave sketches around the law office like he was daring the walls to argue with him, and Crozier would tear them up, angry and scared at the same time. But Robert kept climbing. He kept thinking that if a pole could lift him over a bar, then maybe his talent could lift him out of everything that tried to hold him down. College was supposed to be the smooth road, but he could not sit still long enough for smooth. He took an athletic scholarship to the College of the Pacific in Stockton, partly because it had theater energy he could feel in the air. Then, after one semester, he walked away from the stability like it was a coat that did not fit. He transferred again and again, chasing the classes and stages that felt real to him. He tried San Francisco State, Washington University, and more places after that, never settling long enough to finish a degree. At first, he thought about animation and even dreamed of Disney, but acting pulled harder because acting let him become the puppets without strings. It let him stand in front of people and feel the room breathe with him. That choice made the fights at home worse because his father saw it as reckless. Crozier had worked too hard to build a practice, and he wanted his son to build something solid too, especially with Bethel's health getting worse. But Robert was already living by a different rule. He was the kind of kid who had learned to entertain himself in a basement, so he did not fear going alone. If anything, loneliness had trained him for it. He would rather struggle on a stage than live safe and bored, and he said it in ways that cut deep. So he went to New York in 1951 with almost nothing, stepping into a city that could chew up hope and spit it out. He trained at HB Studio, and the work was brutal in the best way. Uta Hagen pushed him hard, calling out every stiff move and every lazy choice, and he took it because he needed someone to tell him the truth. Money stayed tight. He slept in cheap rooms, took tiny jobs, and sometimes lived like a ghost, moving from one scrape to the next. He even brought his puppets back to the streets in a new form, doing what he could to make a few dollars and keep moving. His father warned him to come home, and at times the family helped, then pulled back again when anger flared. At one point, Crozier cut him off, forcing Robert to pawn what he could just to eat. That kind of moment either breaks a person or turns them into steel. And Robert chose steel. Those years also taught him how to use pain instead of hiding from it. He carried his mother's illness in his mind, the chemical work and the fatigue, and he turned that into stories and scenes, the same way he once turned loneliness into puppet battles. Even when shows failed, he learned how to save a moment with instinct and timing. He learned how to improvise, how to read an audience, how to stand in a tiny room and still make it feel like the world mattered. Then, in the mid-1950s, the grind began to pay off. He found real attention in off-Broadway spaces where actors fought for everything, and he got a breakthrough that did not feel soft or lucky. It felt earned the hard way. In 1956, he stood out in a production of He Who Gets Slapped, a dark circus story about humiliation and revenge, and his intensity cut through the room. It brought him an Obie Award, and that single honor changed how people spoke his name. Suddenly, he was not only the tall, lean guy with the sharp humor and sly smile. He was a serious actor who could scare you, make you laugh, and then make you uneasy about your own laughter. That timing mattered because television was changing too, and the industry was living with fear. The 1950s Red Scare and Blacklist era had ruined careers, and networks were careful about who they put on screen. Robert was not a big name tied to old studio politics, so he slipped into roles where others could not. He began showing up in live anthology shows and westerns, and the work came fast.
Obie! Oh, by golly!
In 1956, he led a pilot called Badge of Honor as Hobie Gilman, a man who picks up a dead ranger's badge and goes after a gang in Texas. There was something raw in that story that fit him, because he understood what it meant to fight for a place in the world with nothing but stubbornness and nerve. By 1957, he landed track down and became Hobie Gilman for real, and that steady part gave him a base to build on. He did not just act on the show either. He wrote too, and he wrote with a personal edge that made the stories feel like they had teeth. In 1959, he wrote an episode called Back to Crawford and cast his real wife, Nancy Ash, in a role that carried heat and danger. On screen, her character was a past love turned furious, and his character had to face how old choices can poison the present. It was dramatic, and it also hinted at what his own life was becoming, because Robert was never good at keeping work and home in separate boxes. Trackdown also brushed up against another turning point, because the show helped set up the space where Steve McQueen could break through. McQueen appeared in episodes, and the spin-off Wanted Dead or Alive turned him into a rising star. Robert had helped, guided, and worked beside him, yet he watched the spotlight swing away. That kind of moment sits in the gut. It does not ruin you, but it can teach you bitterness if you let it. And Robert carried that sting for years, even while he kept working. After Trackdown ended in 1959, he did not slow down. The early 1960s became a run of guest roles that made him familiar to everyone, even if they could not always place his name. He played men with shadows behind their eyes, men who joked to cover pain, men who looked calm while something inside them stayed restless. On Bonanza in 1961, he played Ed Payson, a reformed gunfighter haunted by a duel and pushed toward tragedy again. On Rawhide, he showed up as a soldier with an addiction that made every moment feel desperate. He appeared on The Rifleman more than once, slipping into different faces while still carrying that same cool edge that directors loved and feared. That busy pace came with a cost. Long shoots and hard stunts left him worn down, and more than once he pushed through injuries like he was still that teen who refused to stop after a rough landing. He took darker roles too, digging into the mind. On The Outer Limits in 1963, he led The Architects of Fear, playing a scientist forced into a nightmare plan where his own body becomes part of a lie meant to scare the world into peace. The story hits like a cold hand, because the world kills the monster without realizing the man inside, and the tragedy sits with you after the screen goes dark. Robert played it with a kind of terror that felt personal, like the basement boy had finally stepped into the harshest puppet show of all, and could not pull the strings anymore.
How's he doing, Lenny?
Third-degree burns on both his arms. Shoulder and his face aren't much better.
That same year, he appeared in PT 109 as Ensign George Barney Ross, tied to the story of John F. Kennedy and the war at sea. The filming was demanding, full of water scenes and survival moments that pushed his body to the edge. It came out not long before Kennedy was assassinated, and that timing gave the film a strange weight, as if history had reached out and pressed its thumb onto the story. While his career kept rising, his personal life kept cracking under pressure. He married young. On September 23, 1951, he married Elaine Carroll when he was only 21. The love was real, but the life was unstable, and by 1956, they divorced. There were no kids, only years of trying to fit two lives into one schedule that never stopped moving. Robert later made it clear that fame can turn home into a cage if you do not know how to step out of the spotlight and be simple again. Not long after, he married Nancy Ashe in 1957, and this marriage brought children and noise and the kind of chaos that an only child never grows up expecting. They had 4 kids: Joshua in 1958, Jason in 1961, Joseph in 1963, and Rachel in 1964. The house filled up, and for a while it probably felt like a miracle to someone who once fought silence with puppets. Yet the same drive that fed his work also starved his home. He chased roles, wrote scripts, and stayed on sets, and the absences piled up like unpaid bills. By 1966, that marriage ended too, and the pattern became hard to ignore. Even later in life, he showed that he could be fierce about what he believed, and it did not always come from a comfortable place. He took on causes that mattered to him, including animal rights And he even joined a lawsuit connected to concerns about elephant treatment at the Los Angeles Zoo. It surprised people who only knew him as a cool actor with a sharp smile. But it also made sense if you tracked the whole story. He had always been someone who hated cages, whether they were made of expectations, fear, or plain old habit.
Kids you hired. What did you tell him? Why? Well, he thinks we're spies. I told him that.
You did what?
We're an American tennis.
Robert Culp pushed hard for Bill Cosby to become his partner on I Spy, and at the time, that decision shook television. No black actor had ever shared equal lead billing in a primetime drama, and the network executives were nervous from the start. When the pilot episode was filmed, Cosby struggled with his lines and looked unsure in front of the camera. The executives quickly decided he was not ready and wanted him replaced before the show even began. Culp refused to let that happen. He told them plainly that if Cosby went, he would go too, and without him, the show would collapse. Then he went back to work and started rewriting scripts late into the night, so the dialogue sounded more natural for Cosby. Instead of stiff spy talk, the scenes began to include quick jokes and relaxed comments that felt closer to Cosby's stand-up style. Between shoots, Culp coached him in private, showing him how to hold a look, how to play emotion, and how to move with confidence in front of the camera. Step by step, Cosby improved, and the show survived because of that effort. Still, the partnership never felt simple. Even while helping him, Culp sometimes felt that Cosby carried a quiet anger and acted as if success was something he deserved. Years later, he would say that he felt pushed aside, as if all the attention went to Cosby, while his own work faded into the background. Yet in those early days, they worked side by side in demanding locations, filming in crowded streets and narrow alleys where scenes felt almost dangerous. Culp insisted on doing his own stunts, climbing and jumping wherever the script demanded, all while the show slowly turned Cosby into a major star. The series changed television by leaving the safety of studio sets and traveling across the world. Episodes were filmed in Hong Kong, Acapulco, and Tokyo, where the streets and buildings became part of the story. Culp did far more than act. He wrote and directed several episodes and poured himself into the work, shaping the tone and rhythm of the show. The effort brought recognition and award nominations, yet the results hurt more than they helped. Each year, Cosby won the Emmy for Best Actor, while Culp went home empty-handed. Publicly, he congratulated his partner and spoke with pride about their success. But privately, the losses stayed with him. He had written scenes to highlight Cosby's strengths and helped shape performances that audiences loved. Yet the praise seemed to move in only one direction. Even so, the two men shared a strange closeness that few people understood. During long days on location, they developed a private way of talking filled with jokes and small signals that only they understood. Conversations would drift into this private language without warning, leaving everyone else confused. Their wives disliked it so much that they eventually stopped joining them for dinners because they felt shut out of conversations that made no sense. To Culp, the language felt like proof of trust between partners who depended on each other every day. To others, it looked like a wall that separated them from the rest of the world. Behind the laughter, there was always tension. Culp continued shaping scripts so Cosby could improvise naturally, and the results often worked beautifully on screen. But each success also deepened the feeling that his own contribution remained hidden. He believed he had rescued the series when it was close to collapse and had helped turn a struggling comedian into a respected actor. As Cosby's fame grew, that belief hardened into quiet resentment. Emmy ceremonies and press interviews only made the difference more visible, and the distance between them slowly widened even while the show stayed popular. During this same period, another story was unfolding in Culp's life. While filming an episode set during the Vietnam conflict, he cast actress France Nguyen in a key role, and the connection between them quickly moved beyond the script. Long nights of rehearsals turned into private moments, and the excitement of location filming pulled them closer together. Within a short time, they married, caught up in a rush that felt unstoppable at the moment. Culp spoke of her as a source of inspiration, and their early months together seemed full of promise. The happiness did not last. Small disagreements grew into loud arguments, and both later spoke of betrayals and broken trust. Stories circulated about jealousy and sudden fights that turned ordinary days into chaos. By the end of the decade, the marriage collapsed in a bitter divorce that left deep marks on both of them. The passion that once energized Culp's work now left him restless and guarded, and friends began to notice that he trusted fewer people as time passed. When I Spy ended, Culp stepped into a different kind of spotlight.
I'm very embarrassed.
Oh, listen. Come on now. That's what I was trying to say. You mustn't be embarrassed. You mustn't feel ill at ease. I don't want that. Please sit down.
He starred in the film Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, playing a man who encouraged honesty and freedom in relationships at a time when the country was changing fast. The story followed two couples who pushed the limits of marriage and desire, and audiences were drawn to the mix of humor and tension. The movie cost little to make, but earned far more than anyone expected, turning it into a major success. Some viewers praised its honesty, while others attacked it as a threat to traditional values. Either way, the film fixed Culp's image as a modern and daring figure, a man who seemed comfortable in a world where rules were shifting. His personal life stayed unsettled. After the breakup with Nguyen, he married again, and work and home soon became tangled together. He directed projects that included his wife in the cast while trying to rebuild his career through steady film work. Many of these movies struggled at the box office, and the pressure of constant production strained the marriage until it ended as well. The pattern repeated itself as the years passed, with short marriages and demanding schedules leaving little room for stability. Through the 1970s, he appeared in a string of films that failed to capture the excitement of his earlier success. He often played sharp and distant characters, men who lived by their own rules, and the roles began to blend together. Financial pressures pushed him to accept whatever work was available, and the gap between past fame and present reality became harder to ignore. By the end of the decade, he returned mainly to television, where steady roles kept him visible even if the sense of stardom had faded. Away from acting, he found another cause that mattered deeply to him. He joined efforts to challenge the treatment of elephants at the Los Angeles Zoo, speaking out against the conditions in which they lived and supporting a lawsuit that tried to force change. The case did not succeed, yet it showed a side of him that many people never saw, a man willing to stand firmly behind something he believed was right. Robert Culp saw something in Bill Cosby before anyone else did. Back in the mid-60s, when they started working together on I Spy, Cosby was new to acting and still rough around the edges. Culp noticed right away that Cosby was not a traditional actor. He was a comedian with natural timing and a strong presence, and if the show wanted to survive, it had to lean into that. So Culp began rewriting scripts himself, shaping scenes so Cosby could perform in a way that felt natural. At one point, the producers were close to canceling the show because Cosby's early performances felt stiff. But Culp kept adjusting the material until everything clicked. Years later, Culp spoke openly about those early days and admitted Cosby had struggled badly at the start.
Cos and I went all the way through the same way. We never changed. He trusted me totally with regard to story.
He said Cosby carried a deep anger and acted like the world owed him success. What mattered was that Culp pushed him to show real emotion, and slowly Cosby grew into the role that made him famous. Culp believed he helped turn Cosby into a star, yet he often felt people forgot that part of the story. When award season came around, the tension quietly grew. Culp was nominated for lead actor 3 years in a row and lost every time to Cosby. He never attacked Cosby in public, but the losses stayed with him. He still said he was proud of what they built together, even as part of him struggled with being seen as a small note in someone else's success. Yet behind the scenes, their connection ran deeper than most people knew. The two men developed a strange kind of friendship that puzzled everyone around them. They joked so much that they seemed to share their own private language. Sometimes they would laugh at things no one else understood, leaving their wives staring in confusion until they finally gave up and walked away. Cosby later said, "It felt like a secret society with only 2 members. The bond grew during long days on the I Was Spy sets, where they learned to communicate without even speaking. Producers sometimes found it frustrating, but that silent understanding helped their scenes feel alive. They even created nicknames for each other. Culp became Hobie from one of his earlier roles, and Cosby became Dobbsy after a character from an old movie. When they made mistakes on set, they would break into silly dances or act out scenes from films they loved. The crew sometimes felt shut out of their little world, yet the strange closeness helped the show succeed. 3 seasons in a row earned Emmy recognition, and much of that came from the easy rhythm between the 2 leads. Still, the pressure of competition never fully disappeared. Every year, the Emmys placed them side by side in the same category, and every year Cosby walked away with the award. Culp insisted that friendship mattered more than trophies, and said everything else came second to the fact that they liked each other. Cosby admitted he felt uncomfortable after winning because he knew Culp deserved recognition too. After each ceremony, he would return to the set feeling awkward until Culp casually asked how he was doing, and the tension melted away. Culp often explained that he saw himself as the actor while Cosby was the entertainer. He kept shaping scenes to fit that balance, and the mix gave the show its sharp energy. Even so, a quiet frustration lived beneath the surface. Culp believed no other pair could have done what they did, and he credited both luck and trust for the show's success. During the original run, he kept any resentment private, letting the work speak for itself, but the feeling never completely faded. Part of that tension came from Culp's strong personality. He demanded high standards from himself and everyone around him, and not everyone could handle it. In commentaries for episodes, he wrote himself he spoke with brutal honesty about old arguments and broken relationships. His brief marriage to actress France Nguyen became one of the deepest grudges he carried. Small misunderstandings grew into lasting anger, and he never seemed to let them go. On set, he could be just as intense. He challenged producers and openly criticized directors he thought were weak. If a scene felt wrong, he said so without hesitation, even when it made people uncomfortable. His acting style felt fresh and thoughtful, full of pauses and quiet moments that drew attention. But that same intensity sometimes pushed people away. The same drive that helped him guide Cosby also created friction when he felt unappreciated. Years later, something unexpected happened. In 1994, Robert Culp and Bill Cosby reunited for a television movie called I Spy Returns. More than 20 years had passed since the original series, and their relationship had gone through both closeness and strain. Cosby had built a huge career while Culp often felt left behind. Yet when the cameras started rolling, their chemistry returned almost instantly. Critics said they still felt inseparable, 2 older men thrown back into a world of danger and adventure. Behind the scenes, the old feelings never fully disappeared. Culp stayed polite and focused on the work, but people around the production sensed he still believed he had never received full credit for the original show. Cosby now had influence and status in Hollywood that Culp never enjoyed. Even so, the reunion brought fresh attention to Culp and opened doors for more roles. During the 90s, his voice became familiar to a new generation when he played J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man, the animated series. His sharp delivery gave the character energy and presence. He made guest appearances on popular shows and returned often to Columbo, where he played clever murderers who matched wits with Peter Falk's detective. Yet big leading roles never returned, and many of his later projects were small films that failed to reach wide audiences. Outside of acting, he followed causes that mattered deeply to him. He spoke out for civil rights and marched alongside Cosby after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. Decades later, he fought for animal rights and even took legal action against the Los Angeles Zoo over the treatment of elephants. He believed strongly in those fights and never softened his views, even when people dismissed him as a fading star. His personal life stayed just as complicated. 5 marriages came and went over the years, leaving behind 5 children who grew up in the middle of his busy career. His final marriage lasted the longest and brought a daughter who stayed mostly out of the spotlight. Despite the chaos, he cared deeply for his family and often spoke with pride about his children's work. As he grew older, he looked back with mixed feelings. He admitted that his own cynicism had cost him opportunities and that he sometimes pushed people away. He had turned down major roles that might have changed his career, choices he later questioned. Still, he insisted that Hollywood never owed him anything and that he lived the life he chose.
And tonight, Hollywood is reacting to word late today of the death of actor Robert Culp. He was best known for the...
In March 2010, Robert Culp stepped outside his home near Runyon Canyon Park and collapsed. A jogger found him and called for help, but he died before noon at the age of 79. The official cause was a heart attack, though the fall that followed caused severe head injuries. The man who once raced across rooftops as a television spy was gone in a quiet moment on an ordinary day.